Have you ever wondered why so many people are developing chronic illnesses as they age? We're talking things like arthritis, heart disease, and diabetes. Now, this might surprise you, but there are 10 diseases that science now links directly to what we're eating. And today, I'm going to give you 5 simple swaps that you can make to avoid getting sick in the first place or start healing from any chronic diseases you might already have. This isn't about eating perfectly, it's just really about understanding what your body needs and giving it those nutrients and ingredients that it needs to function really well. A lot of people believe as we get older that we are going to get sick, but it actually doesn't have to be that way. That's not how we're supposed to function. I know a few people that are actually in their 80s that are not sick at all. They're not on medications. It can be done, but it does take a couple of little changes. If you're new here, my name's Gina. I am a qualified nutritionist with 20 years experience. If everyone just understood what I'm about to tell you, we could drastically cut the amount of chronic disease by an astounding amount. Okay, so we are in the middle of an epidemic of chronic disease. It is unprecedented throughout history, and it has accelerated in perfect alignment with the industrialization of our food supply. What we're seeing right now is exactly what happens when you feed a body chemicals it was never designed to handle. Yes, I'm talking about ultra-processed foods. But not all processing is the same. Fermenting a yogurt might be considered processing because, well, it's not milk anymore, it's become yogurt. That's completely fine. What we're talking about are the ultra-processed foods. We're talking about industrial formulations made mostly from substances that have been extracted from foods, or worse yet, synthesized in a laboratory with little to no whole food remaining in the final product. So, to give you an example of ultra-processed foods, think things like breakfast cereals, breads, biscuits, crisps, fizzy drinks are the worst, flavored yogurts, which are actually considered a dessert because they've got so much sugar in them, even things like protein bars, protein shakes. Have you ever seen protein shake tree? No. So, these things are very, very highly processed. Basically, if it has more than 5 ingredients or a list of ingredients that you can't pronounce and that don't resemble any sort of food, you can pretty much say that it's a processed food. The way that I normally describe this with my clients is if it's not pecking from a ground or grazing from a ground, if you didn't have to slaughter it and you don't see it in a plant somewhere, it is processed, right? So that's a really easy way to look at it. These foods typically contain artificial flavors, colors and sweeteners, emulsifiers, preservatives, refined sugars, and industrially processed seed oils, and they're a big problem. And here's the thing, they are not just designed to feed you, this is what I really want you to get, they are engineered to make you want more. Now, I have had a food addiction. I know what that's like. I know what food noise feels like. I did a video on that actually, if you're interested in exploring that for yourself. But I know this to be true because after I qualified and lost a whole bunch of weight, I actually worked in the food industry and I got to have a little peek behind the curtain and see what's actually going on. And I can tell you for certain, these foods are designed to make you want more and more. And you cannot control yourself unless you just get off them. Like an addict has to get off whatever it is that they're addicted to. It's the same thing. So, in the average Western diet, ultra-processed foods now make up more than half of our total calorie intake, and in some populations, it's closer to 70%. This has never ever happened in human history before, and Mother Nature did not make mistakes when it comes to our food. Every macronutrient in its natural form comes packaged with exactly what our body needs to digest, process, and use that whole food and all of its ingredients. So let's look at sugar, for example. Sugar in nature always comes wrapped in lots and lots of fiber. Think about where sugar exists in nature. So look at a fruit, for example. If you were to pick fresh fruit from a tree, it's really not that sweet. Nothing compared to the fruits in our supermarkets. And that's because they've been shipped across the globe and they've been sitting in storage, and as they are sitting in storage, they actually sweeten up, so the sugar content ends up being higher. Vegetables contain lots and lots of fiber. They're not sugary per se, but they do have carbohydrates in them, but most of the carbohydrate is fiber. Then you've got things like sugarcane, the humble old sugarcane, which probably most of us have never actually seen in our entire life. We actually have quite a lot of sugarcane here in Queensland. But when you look at sugarcane, we would never eat that because it is literally just fiber, you know, like you'd have to work very, very hard to actually get the sugar out of it. So sugar always comes with a significant amount of fiber. And here's the thing, that fiber slows the release of the sugar into our bloodstream, and it also feeds our gut bacteria, and it triggers hormones to tell our brain that we're full. Now take that same sugar, extract it, remove all the minerals and the fiber, put it into a soft drink, and when that sugar hits your bloodstream, which is going to happen almost immediately, insulin spikes sharply, hunger hormones don't even get touched, and you're hungry again within an hour. And the other thing that happens is all that sugar is actually populating your gut with pathogenic bacteria. So you're not feeding the good guys, you're feeding the ones that actually hurt you. The same principle applies to protein. So when we look around nature, protein comes in animal products. That's where it's mostly found, right? And those animal products are wrapped up in a nice little bundle for us with lots of fat, which slows down the digestion. It triggers our hormones that tell us that we're full. It provides fat-soluble vitamins and a whole host of other vitamins and minerals. Plant proteins also come with fiber, which slows down the whole process. The food industry stripped both, giving us fat-free chicken breast, protein isolates, and whey protein powder, and then it was marketed to us to tell us that it was healthy. But isolated protein without its natural companions doesn't satisfy you in the same way. And fat is no different. Avocados, nuts, seeds, eggs, all natural sources of great fats, but they always arrive with fiber, antioxidants, and protein. Whereas industrial refined oils like canola oil, sunflower oil, or soybean oil are extracted through high heat chemical processes, which strips away every protective compound and added to virtually every processed food that we find on the shelf. These oils oxidize easily and they promote inflammation throughout the human body. And here's the thing, the body genuinely does not know how to handle these compounds because they don't come from nature. The core principle here is really, really simple. Naturally packaged ingredients come together for a reason. Our body knows how to handle the things that are coming from nature. Processing, however, dismantles all of those natural compositions, and when your body gets fragments of a food rather than the whole food, which has been stripped of all of its fiber, vitamins and minerals and natural compounds, it responds with confusion and dysregulation, and over time this all causes disease. Now let's look at the additives themselves and what they actually do. So let's talk emulsifiers. They are added to blend ingredients together to extend shelf life, and they've been shown in research to degrade the mucus layer that protects our gut wall. They increase intestinal permeability and alter gut bacteria in ways that drive chronic low-grade inflammation. That inflammation is then the root cause of almost every condition that I am about to talk about. Artificial sweeteners, sold for decades as safe alternatives to sugar, are increasingly shown to disrupt gut bacteria, impair glucose metabolism, isn't that funny, and may actually trigger an insulin response, some of them do, through the sweet taste, but there's other mechanisms going on there as well, even without real sugar being present, mind you. And industrial seed oils have dramatically shifted the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fats, which causes a real issue. Omega-3 fats decrease inflammation, but excess omega-6 fats promote chronic inflammation. And when all of these oils are heated, as they are in virtually all of the processed foods that we see, they produce compounds that damage cells directly. So what does the research actually link processed foods to? Now, I think you're going to like this. The list is long, and honestly, it is very alarming. The first is type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. That's directly related to refined carbohydrates repeatedly spiking insulin, artificial sweeteners disrupting the gut bacteria involved in our glucose regulation, and inflammatory oils impairing insulin receptor function at the cellular level. Large studies consistently show significant elevated diabetes risk in people who consume a lot of processed foods. The second is obesity. I think we all know about that, right? Ultra-processed foods drive overconsumption, not through weakness or willpower, but instead through our biology. These foods are engineered to override the brain's natural stop signals. You know, our hormones, our GLP-1 and our GIP, because there's a lack of fiber, so our satiety hormones don't even get triggered. And actually, a landmark NIH study found that people eating ultra-processed foods spontaneously consumed significantly more calories per day than those that ate an unprocessed food diet. And look, I can tell you that is absolutely true, because a long time ago, before I started my studies, I was one of those people living on highly processed food. Now, I barely eat any processed food, and the difference is amazing. The difference in the way that I feel, even though I'm like 30 years older, and the difference in the way my brain functions. I have no medical conditions whatsoever, whereas back then I was told by a doctor that I had high cholesterol and I may need cholesterol medication. Can you believe that at such a young age? So I can tell you firsthand that this stuff is actually true. Had I kept going down that path that I was on, today I would be on diabetes medication, I would have been on blood pressure medication, I would have been on cholesterol medication, all the rest. You know, I would have had arthritis and all the other things. So I think it's really important that we just give this a little bit of thought. And like I said, nobody needs to be perfect. It's just a few little changes. It is a neurological response to engineered food, and we know that. The third is cardiovascular disease, and inflammatory seed oils are the biggest one here. They damage the lining of our blood vessels. Excess sodium drives blood pressure up. Refined carbohydrates drive insulin resistance, which we know, which then causes sodium retention and pushes our blood pressure up as well. Cardiovascular mortality, in other words, death, is consistently higher in populations who live on ultra-processed foods. The fourth is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and this is actually becoming a real issue just in the last maybe 10 years. And this is driven directly from fructose corn syrup that is now found in enormous quantities in the processed foods and drinks that we have available. So the thing with fructose is it's almost entirely processed by the liver, which converts excess fructose directly into fat, which is then stored in the liver. Rates of this condition have risen almost in perfect parallel with the addition of fructose corn syrup entering our food supply. Isn't that interesting? It is now one of the most common liver conditions in the world. Moving on, number 5 is gut disease and leaky gut. So emulsifiers degrade our gut mucosal lining. Preservatives and artificial sweeteners disrupt the microbiome. A lack of dietary fiber starves our good bacteria and instead promotes bad bacteria. And the result is increased intestinal permeability, which is just a fancy way of saying leaky gut, where undigested particles and bacteria fragments enter into the bloodstream and then trigger an immune activation. That immune activation brings us to number 6, which is autoimmune conditions. The autoimmune response is now strongly linked to the rise in conditions like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, and even type 1 diabetes. The connection between processed food and autoimmune disease is gaining significant traction in the research. So the 7th might surprise you a little bit, depression and anxiety. 90% of the serotonin that is produced in our body is actually produced in our gut. So you can see here how a disrupted microbiome might actually interfere with how that particular neurotransmitter is produced in our gut, right? So chronic inflammation from processed food diets crosses the blood-brain barrier as well, and large studies consistently link processed food consumption to significantly higher rates of depression and anxiety. And of course, blood sugar swings from processed food affects mood directly as well. You know, that crash that you get after a high sugar meal, that is actually a chemical event. It's not just a feeling and it's not just you being moody. So the eighth is hypertension, which comes from excess sodium in processed foods. That puts a strain on our kidneys. Insulin resistance from the high sugar diet causes the kidneys to retain sodium even further. The average processed food diet delivers 2 to 3 times the amount of sodium that you would find in a whole food diet. The ninth condition is certain cancers. The World Health Organization classifies processed meats as a group 1 carcinogen, meaning there is significant evidence now of a direct cancer link. Sodium nitrate in processed meats converts to nitrous amines in the gut. Chronic inflammation from ultra-processed foods promotes cancer cell proliferation, and of course, obesity, driven significantly by these foods, is itself a risk factor for at least 13 different types of cancer. And finally, the 10th chronic disease is kidney disease. High sodium loads from processed foods puts the kidneys under relentless pressure over time. Phosphate additives, which are absorbed far more easily than phosphate from natural foods, contributes to kidney function decline as well. And insulin resistance itself, driven by processed food, progressively damages the kidneys over years. Now, you don't need to overhaul everything overnight. That's not what I'm saying. These 5 swaps alone will dramatically reduce your processed food intake and start shifting your health in the right direction. The key is to be consistent. That's it. So just choose something that you can do, that you can be consistent at, and you'll start seeing results pretty soon. So the breakfast cereal is the first. Let's get rid of that and swap that out for some eggs. Forget the fruit juice. Have a nice cup of tea or coffee if you like, but go for something like eggs and bacon, or something that's full of protein and comes from something that resembles a real food. You could even throw in some vegetables into your breakfast and be like a Thai person. So this sort of breakfast will keep you full for hours, and it actually will stabilize your blood sugars for much longer during the day. Actually, I want to give you a challenge. You will probably notice if you start doing this, within a week, you won't need to eat anything again until maybe early afternoon, like after lunch. You won't need the mid-morning snack. You probably won't even need lunch. It'll be like mid-afternoon before you're starting to feel really hungry again, because eggs stick to the sides. They are the best quality protein that we can take. So the second swap could be flavored yogurt for plain full-fat yogurt, and you can even add some berries to it to flavor it. Maybe some nuts. I love Greek full-fat, normal, plain, pot-set Greek yogurt, so it's full of beneficial bacteria. And then I put some berries on top, maybe some crushed nuts as well. They're delicious, like just peanuts. Absolutely divine. Those yogurts that you've been having are just loaded with sugar, and essentially we could probably call them just dessert. But plain full-fat yogurt with a handful of berries and maybe some nuts gives you good quality protein, natural fiber from the berries, and you'll get the sweetness that you want without the sugar spikes. Blueberries, for example, only have like 5% sugar. The rest of the carbohydrate is all fiber. You could, if you need a snack during the day, you could have yourself a handful of nuts and seeds, or you could make yourself some nuts and seeds crackers. I have a recipe in another video that I did. Those crackers are absolutely full of fiber, very, very low carbs, so they're not going to raise your blood sugars, and they are full of micronutrients as well. Lots of vitamins and minerals to feed all of your cells, and I actually went through all of the nutrition after I showed you the recipe, so I will link that below for you, and if you're interested in making those crackers, you can check them out. The stuff that we see on the shelf are perfect for delivering a lovely long-term health condition, so try and avoid those as much as possible. So the fourth swap is get rid of all fizzy drinks. Swap it out for tea, coffee with no sugar, sparkling water with a slice of lemon or lime, or maybe a slice of orange. That's delicious, I think. But that is the single biggest change that you could make to change your health long term. And I tell you what, once you do this, if you've been drinking sodas, soft drinks, full of sugar drinks, after a couple of months, when you go to have another one, when you haven't done it for a while, your taste buds will be like, oh my God. There's actually a reason for that. We get all new taste buds within 3 weeks. So that's one of the reasons it's relatively easy to change our eating habits. Because if you stop eating something that you were once addicted to, and then you try and go back to it, at some point, you're going to be like, no, that doesn't actually taste as good as it used to. So the fifth swap is seed oils. This is also really important. And we need to swap out canola oil, sunflower oil, and vegetable oil for something a little bit healthier. So you could use ghee, butter, coconut oil, or olive oil. These are more stable for cooking at high temperatures. They come from whole food sources, and your body actually knows what to do with them. This is one change alone that can reduce your oxidative stress exposure enormously. So just think of it like this. You've got a choice at every single meal. You can choose to continue down the path that you're going, exactly the same situation that I was in all those years ago, or you can decide to start making small changes. And you know what? Over time, all these small changes actually stack up to be massive, big changes. And before you know it, you look around your life and you're like, wow, yeah, I'm actually pretty healthy. The chronic disease epidemic that we're living in right now, it doesn't have to be inevitable. It is not genetic. It is largely a predictable result of feeding human bodies industrial products for decades on end and calling it food. And with that little shift in understanding, you can see how what's on your plate has everything to do with what's going on with your health. So if you would like more information on how to control your blood sugar and your insulin levels, watch my video on insulin resistance next. And if you're interested in losing weight by changing your metabolic rate, very important, and supporting your overall health as well, watch the video in the pinned comment for my private membership group. You might be interested in that. So I will see you in one of those videos.
Smarternuthub Nutrition. DLP done well. Be a Smarternuthub.